All right. Well, very good. I thank everybody for coming in today. And we have a little bit of an agenda here. And then, as we always do in these meetings, we'll have a little bit of time, hopefully, at the end for some questions. Um, and welcome. Just for our spring update for the stakeholders. Talk to you a little bit about what we're going to talk about here today. We're going to go over Access DEQ and have a little demo about that. And I know that many of you have taken it on to see if how the system is working and trying to use it to apply into for new projects. And the system is up and mostly working. We have had a few bugs over its time that we've had. And we have had folks working on that, and for the most part, we have that worked out. There are still a few other things that are still being worked on to get that 100%, but the system is up and running now and working and accepting. We're accepting applications through the system, so that is a good thing. And I'm going to ask Christy to talk about that in just a moment. But some of the other agenda items we have, I'm going to provide a little bit of a funding update and talk a little bit about the fee increases. We have been hinting about this for a while now with stakeholder meetings, and we have some more concrete proposals that we have been working on that I'll be able to explain a little bit today. And then we're going to talk about the LURU issue resolution, which just has come out, and a non-compliance fee for folks who do not submit LURUs, and that Jocelyn is going to be going over, and I will talk about that and just mention it, but she's going to go into that in a little more detail. And then that there is also a new PFAS issue resolution as well that Sharon's going to talk about. We have also a couple of new checklists that will be coming out as well. And Tracy's going to talk a little bit about a new report checklist. And then Jordan's going to talk a little bit about the operations and maintenance checklist. They have not been finalized or published as of yet, but we're going to talk about them and let you know about them and the approach that we're going to have with them and how we think that's going to help our process and help you all as well. So going to talk about those two things and get those in place as soon as possible. But we felt like they're in good enough spot at this particular point in time to at least let you know what's coming down the pike in the very near future. All right. So with that, let me turn it over to Christy to share her screen and talk a little bit about Access DEQ with respect to Brownfields.
Thank you so much. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this is the login screen for Access DEQ. Over here, even if you're not signed in or don't have an account, here's some help items that you can check out if you need to. So this is where you sign in. If you do not have your Access DEQ account yet, you just click this link to register now. And you need to put in an email that you can access because you'll get an activation link. So you just enter and register. That's how you do it. The first time you sign in, you'll need to set your security questions and sign an ESA. And in these helps, it talks about that. So once you've signed in, this is what it looks like. We have this left-hand nav menu here. You can click this hamburger to make it expand or go away. The tiles here, match the headings here, so you can get to stuff either way. So what you do, the first thing you do when you sign up for a new account is you can go under settings and go to your profile. And what you want to do is fill in your who you are and the company you're with and some contact phone numbers. And after you do that, you can access some of your existing projects. So the way you do that is go to this permits and projects, or you can do it from here. And the first time, probably this grid's going to be empty for you. So down here is this link, request access here. You click that, and you get this search grid. Now this will, I'm in the test system, but you'll see a lot of stuff. This is everything that we have in the system. So this search is on this column and this column, the two numbers and the location. So if you know your project number, you can just start entering it, and the list will start to narrow down. So here I've narrowed it down. So I didn't even have to enter the whole project number. You can also do that with the name. So as I start typing, the list starts narrowing down, but it gets narrowed down to the one I want. So this is the one I want. Select and confirm. And then this box will come up where you send your request for access. So you need to explain, why you're getting access. So, type in something that makes sense, that gives the EQ enough information to, verify that you ought to have access. And then you'll get a little request number, and staff at DEQ will then look at your request and process it. And you'll get an email notification when you have access. So let's say I got my access. I'll just go into a different project here. I want to upload some assessments. So you get to the assessment screen from the project details here. You just see some information about the project. And then here's a link to assessments. So what we're seeing here, there's already some assessments here. This one is in status received, and this is one that we entered in in the application. So if you use time, and we can see it's in receipt status. This one is pending, and it's got a due date, and that means that someone on the Brownfields staff went ahead and entered the assessment for you and gave you a due date, and you just click this when you're ready to upload it, and you would enter in, the date of the assessment, and you would explain what it is. Next, and then you can just you can do this to select a file. You can also just drag and drop. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, I'll just do it this way. Sorry. Okay, submit. There we go. And there is a limit of 100 megabytes for each individual file. So you can put a link here in the notes if you have a file that's too large. So we've submitted that. This assessment is in return status, which means we've sent one in before and staff has reviewed it, and they have their revisions. They'll email you their marked up copies separately, but you'll see this on here. And then when you make your revisions, then you just go into this assessment and you enter in your new file. I am putting big files on our test system. So that's how you add your files. You can also just add an assessment yourself. It's the same process. You would select the type. You got to drop down here, um, and you put the date, and you put your notes, and then you would upload your file. Now, another place where you can view assessments is when you start entering applications using Access DEQ. You can also see them from the application. Just view details. And then there's a link to this. It's the same assessment screen, same one. It's the same deal. But also what's cool on the applications, when you start using the system, you can share applications with people. So what you do is you just click this under the action share application, and your name's already filled in. And then you would fill in the email address of who you want to share it with. And this email address has to match the email address with which they signed up for Access DEQ or that they are going to. So you fill that in, you fill in the role, pick the one that seems the most appropriate. If you're not sure, you can just put preparer. And then the comments that you put here will go to that person. They're going to get an automated email with an invitation link that they can redeem. And anything you type here would be inserted into that email, so you can, explain what it is. And then once they redeem that invitation, they also have access to the application, and then they can go in and enter assessments. If there's an agreement in place, they can go in to they'll have access in the projects too. And then your applications that are in new pending submission status and awaiting applicant status, those are still editable. So anyone that you share it with can also work on the application with you. So if you have a colleague, you're both working on the application, or they need to upload documents or whatever, that is the way you can share. And this status means you've started to enter the application, you haven't submitted it yet, you've been working on it. So because we save all the progress, you could just work on it a little bit, go away and come back and keep filling it out. And then this one, awaiting applicant, is when you submitted it, but it's been sent back to you for some revisions. So applications in those two statuses, you can go back in and you can edit. One thing I forgot to point out, we also have a playlist of instructional videos on our YouTube. So this link goes right to that. And so it covers stuff like the sharing, registration, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's all I meant to cover. Is there anything else I missed or any questions?
Thanks, Christy. I'll just add that you will see your project managers starting to ask for you to submit these through the portal. It's really a time-saving measure for us to have everything uploaded, and we hope that it'll help you see where your project is in the process as well. So we're really excited about this functionality. Does anybody, if you want to ask any dynamics questions in the chat or raise your hand, we can unmute you.
And there's a user guide in the system as well that's available.
Yes.
So yes.
Yep, and yes. I just dropped the link to that in the if you submit a link to a large report, how long the link to the report is going to have to be we don't have access to like Dropbox or share. It'll have to be a DEQ share file site. So if you have something that's over 100 megabytes, let your project manager know first so we can get you a share file link. That's the way to manage that. Cheryl, I would encourage you to check the not showing any data on the screen. Your permits and projects, you have to connect to a specific project, and the instructions for that are in the user guide. The intent, this is not a public portal per se. It is not something where a property owner of one property would have access to another person, Brownfields property portal. It is something where DEQ kind of is a gatekeeper per se of who has access to information on that particular project. So that is one of the things that's why you have to request access to that site and explain why you are requesting access. Are you the property? Are you the consultant? So that's the purpose
And
of
once you
having.
have access to that, though, there is tracking functions to see where the system, where the agreement is in the system.
All right. Any other access questions? Awesome. All right. Back to you, Bruce.
All right, well, very good. Let me continue to share my screen then here. Thank you, Christy, very much for that demo. And I appreciate everybody who has been on the system, using the system, and been submitting through the system. It's really going to be a time saver and efficiency point for us. So thank you for that. And it's also keeping our data and our tracking data, and is allowing us a lot more analytical information through on all of our projects. So it's a system that we are very much in now and using, and looking forward to gaining its benefits. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, sort of a funding update and potential for fee increases, and a couple of things along those lines. Talk about the federal funding reduction that will be taking place, and I guess maybe taking place in 2027. That is when some of our federal funding grants that we've applied for to offset a lot of these fees end. We're not sure we'll be getting renewed ones. And in fact, there may also be issues pertaining to the executive orders that were issued already from the Trump administration. We do have funding for this year, but our federal funding for next year's grant, even before the 2027 scheduled ending of the grants, may or may not be at risk. And so I will talk a little bit more about what that means for us in terms of budget and funding, and also talk about some of the things that we're addressing in both fee increases and potential proposed sales tax incentive, because it's not only increased costs for the state since 2008 when we last increased fees, but it's increased costs obviously for prospective developers. So a additional or increased sales tax incentive is something that can offset costs on the prospective developer side. So let me talk a little bit about our fees and the fees section of our statute, for which we are very fortunate in that it calls for the department, the costs of the state to be offset by the fees in the Brownfields agreement. So a prospective developer enters into a Brownfield agreement, the department shall pay a fee in an amount equal to the full cost of the Department of Justice of all activities related to the Brownfields agreement. That includes negotiation of it, public notice, community involvement, monitoring, and monitoring the implementation of the Brownfields agreement. So our fees were last set in 2008, and they no longer cover the cost to the state in 2025. We have obtained 3 separate US EPA grants to try to offset these fees. And again, as I said, most of these grants end in 2027, if not sooner, because of the issues that are surrounding federal funding in the Trump administration at this particular point in time. We're staying in touch with EPA about that. We don't have any specific information about the funding other than we have the funding available to us for this year. And come October 1st, the next federal fiscal year, we do not know. We may know something more in April or May from EPA about that, but we do not know something as concrete about that at this particular point in time. So just a little bit about the funding needs for the program. And until 2027 assumes that we'll be having federal funding until that particular point in time. In that first table up above, we have our estimated annual costs of the section, both for production of brownfield agreements and the property management branch for the monitoring the implementation of those brownfield agreements. Our estimated grant revenue that we currently have, and these are grants that we have obtained from EPA for this purpose, and then the remaining fees that are needed. And you can see that after 2027, when those grant goes away, which is a lot of the reason behind why we were planning these fee increases anyway, that number increases significantly as these EPA grants are zeroed out. So I also wanted to mention that there have been a lot of technical changes since the property tax incentive was passed for brownfields and many, many years ago. Obviously, vapor intrusion is now a issue that was not an issue back in the early 2000s. And that is now a big cost driver, essentially, for both assessment and mitigation. So assessment costs are up, mitigation costs are up, legal costs are up, and there does need to be a mechanism for increased offsets of these costs. The last fee increases that we had were in 2008 for the redevelopment now fee. There was a small increase in 2012 on the standard one, but it was not a very significant increase. And also, in this particular point of time, non-compliance work that we conduct on the 750 plus brownfield agreements. Many are in some measure of non-compliance, not all of them, but obviously monitoring them is a difficult task. And so this is a unfunded and fairly undefined cost. And so we're looking to make sure that, as the statute says, this full cost to the state is recouped somehow. Redevelopments of redevelopment are occurring in many brownfield instances where brownfield properties are themselves have a brownfield agreement or is being redeveloped for additional use or a higher level use than was originally contemplated in the agreement. So those are taking place as well. And as I said, there's a plan for a sunset of EPA grant funding. And so all of these factors come together to make for a higher level of costs, and that a fee increase is needed to offset those costs as per the statute. So we also recognize that costs are up for developers in this instance, and that additional tax incentive is needed, and one has been drafted. We've talked a little bit about this to some of the more experienced and stakeholders, and that and also have generated a statute, a draft statute that is being contemplated by DEQ for introduction into this legislative session. I can't really state that there's complete support for it yet, but that is still on the list of potential for going into this particular session, and is a tax incentive that should also help developers. Under this sales tax incentive, the concept behind it is that the sales taxes generated on brownfield properties would be temporarily diverted into a brownfield sales tax fund. It's not a new tax. The sales tax works just the way it does now. It's just that that which is generated by the businesses on the brownfields property would be diverted into this fund, and the fund would be used to reimburse the prospective developer for the mitigation and remediation costs that they paid for systems on that particular site. And when the reimbursement is complete, the sales taxes then revert back into the general fund as normal. There's an annual reimbursement to the prospective developer based on the PD submitting expenses that are approved by DEQ. There's a 10-year sunset on receiving the funds, even if the redevelopment has not taken place or whether it has taken place. You can only receive these reimbursement monies for 10 years. Under this concept, DOR and DEQ may have a small set-aside percentages for their expenses for this. And then we're also looking at a refund multiplier for Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties, so that you may get more than your money back if you're doing a redevelopment in counties that are economically disadvantaged. So these are examples here of how it would work. For instance, these are hypothetical examples, obviously. If you have $50 million in annual sales at a Home Depot store, which happens to be about their average annual sales for Home Depots, you would generate about $3.5 million in annual sales tax. If a VI mitigation system for that building cost about $2 million, that $2 million could be recouped in year one based on the sales tax diversion. And that sales tax would only be diverted for that first year or less than the first year. And that it would then be reverted back to the general fund. And so the state would pick up all the annual sales tax after this reimbursement is done to the prospective developer. If you had a small business, restaurant, let's say, on a ground floor of a mixed use project, $1.5 million in annual sales, approximately $50,000 in annual sales tax. If there's a $150,000 VI mitigation system installed there, years 1 through year 3, you would get a $50,000 reimbursement annually until that $150,000 was paid back. And then the sales tax would revert back to the general fund. And so you can see, in a sense, that this is not a new tax. It's just a temporary diversion of the existing sales tax on these businesses that comes in. And then the state, once the reimbursement is made, picks back up the general fund revenues. So let me talk a little bit about the, in addition to that, the revised fee schema that we have developed. And these are that you'll be interested in. The proposal for increasing the fees for brownfield projects. Obviously, a portion of that is inflation since 2008, whereas $30,000 in 2008, it's valued really at more like $45,000 in today's dollars. And the same thing goes for an $8,000 fee in 2008. It's really more like $12,000 in 2025. In addition to that, there's post-recordation costs for VI systems and soil management that take place these days that were insignificant in 2008, but are very significant in 2025. And so both of these items are attempted to be taken account of in the new proposed fee increase. And so here is what we are looking at for potential for fee increases for brownfields properties. You can see in the upper portion of this table here, the current amounts of $8,000, $30,000, and $15,000, depending on what type of project you have. And this just looks at the number of projects per year and the overall revenue that we can expect. And then in the proposed fee rates, which we say at this particular point are planned for on or about May 1st, that date is at this particular point not set in stone. It is a little bit squishy. It may be May 1st, but we are planning on sometime in the not too distant future of needing this fee increase to be implemented. And so I can't say for certainty that it's May 1st at this particular point in time. That's our planning date. If it does slip from there, we will let you know. But in this particular fee increase, we're looking at standard fee increase from $8,000 to $12,000, a redevelopment fee increase to $45,000, and also ready for reuse projects being in that not a separate fee, but being in that redevelopment now fee vote as well, $45,000. We are looking to help municipal and local governments out by having a bit of a discount for them since they are not receiving the tax incentive from these brownfield projects. And so we're looking at a standard type project. Of course, they can always pay for redevelopment now, but a standard type project for a municipal government of being about $8,000 at this particular point in time. And then also, as I mentioned, the fee to recoup the post recordation activities that were taking place on the site that were not taking place on the site to a great extent in 2008, and that being vapor mitigation and also soil management issues. And so if a site is in active construction and has oversight by us and under that scenario, we're looking at a $10,000 annual charge for that during that period of time. And so you can see the revenue increase here, which is necessary. This still does not completely cover the projected costs from the previous table I showed, but it's getting closer. And with the EPA funding, it certainly narrows the gap of what we're looking at. I will also mention out here to the side that we're also looking to implement a non-compliance fee for those who fail to submit LURUs, and we're looking to do that in January of 2026. If you don't submit your LURU on time in January of 2026, we will be looking to charge an additional fee of $1,000 for that. And I think Jocelyn is going to talk a little bit about that in more detail. And I'm going to turn it over to Jocelyn. Sorry for my throat and cough. I'm getting over something here, so I apologize.
Thanks, Bruce. Maybe we can address a couple of the questions before we move on to the LURUs, if you don't mind. Do you want to do that? Just for everybody. Someone in the chat asked if the use of the property does not generate sales tax, there will be no reimbursement, correct? And so it will not necessarily be available to all developers. And I think that's, in my understanding, that is a correct assumption. Not all properties have a sales tax component to it. So it is, so that is true. But it does, this is a new additional benefit. It does not replace the 5-year property tax incentive that already exists. So I hope that clarifies that. Bruce, did I miss anything big there?
No.
Okay, great. Another question, if we need to amend a Brownfields agreement, is there a set fee for this? The amendment fees right now are, there will be a set fee, and we're working on what kind of a threshold of what requires a new Brownfields agreement. For example, if you're trying to go from commercial to townhomes, that will likely require a new Brownfields agreement and not an amendment. So we're working on some more defined thresholds for what that means. And along with that, setting some more defined rates of amendment fees. So I think that will be forthcoming. It's not something that we have completed yet. The next question, if the PD submits an application right before we change the fees, will it be the existing fees or the date of issuance of the LOE? If the application is submitted before, who'd be obligated to pretty good. Essentially, my understanding of when we change the fees, if somebody applies after when we've published the new fees, if there are applications after that time, those are the agreements that would be affected by the new fees. Is that generally correct, Bruce?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Applications that come in prior to the fee increase deadline will be charged old fees, not new fees.
Correct. Yeah. this is part of our efforts to let you all know what's coming down the pike, right? So that you can start planning and preparing. So that we know you're probably working on budgets for things that are coming at the end of the year already. So this is we're trying to help with that, anticipating those costs that are coming down. If we submit a redevelopment now and know there will be a VI system under the potential new fees, you would have a $45,000 plus $10,000 per year for VI thereafter. So in concept, it's a construction fee. So the idea is to not charge $10,000 if you're just doing your ongoing monitoring and your construction is complete. The $10,000 is a actively in construction fee. So your first year you would pay your RN fee of $45,000. The next year there would be a $10,000 until you complete your construction. It would not be, if you have a third year of monitoring that's required, if you're not in active construction, the concept is not to charge you constantly while you're doing your ongoing monitoring. It's a construction because that's when a lot of the reviews are happening. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's during active construction, and what we believe to be is during those periods of time you're submitting your redevelopment summary reports.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about LURU, an upcoming LURU issue resolution, and Bruce hinted at the non-compliance fee. Sorry, I intended to turn my camera on just for good measure. One of the things that is kind of the key to our program is that we have land use restrictions. These institutional controls are the backbone of what we do and the reason we can leave contaminants in place. The LURU is intended just to be the simplest mechanism for a property owner to say, yes, we are currently following our LURUs. It helps us identify, honestly, when properties transfer and people stop submitting their LURU, we catch a lot of things at that point. So LURUs are really critical as that first level of people understanding what's at their property and what they have to comply with. The problem is we're at about 1,500 LURUs annually, and about 15 or 20% of those required LURUs do not get submitted every year. It is a very significant effort to cross check which LURU and which developer, because as you know, these properties get parceled out and have multiple different property owners. So having that system in place, Dynamics is going to help us with that. But we are at a place where this cost of non-compliance with LURUs, in all honesty, should not be the burden of new developers that are coming in and applying with new properties, in Jocelyn's opinion. This is a cost that should be borne by those who are not compliant with the LURUs as much as possible. So the concept is that you'll see over the next few months, we're going to be trying to provide as much notification as possible. The first part of that is an issue resolution that will come out that will say, we are going to start charging these fees in 2026. Now, I'm not going to nitpick if you are submitted a LURU on February 1st, but if the state has to go through the effort of writing the non-compliance letter and sending those out, and if we have multiple letters and multiple years, at that point, that's when we would start sending invoices to recover the costs of the state. We are looking at approximately $1,000 for non-submittal of a LURU, and we're honestly hoping that it's an incentive for folks to be more diligent about submitting their LURUs, so we have less of those notices of non-compliance to write. So that is the non-compliance fee. The other component of this issue resolution that's going to come out, in many old agreements, the official mechanism of sending things to DEQ is the U.S. mail. We have in practice allowed for, you guys know the Brownfields property management email address well. we have allowed for submittals to allow for people to have an easier way to submit their LURUs to ensure better compliance. Now that we have Access Brownfields, that will be the portal, that will be the required electronic submittal mechanism that starts in January 2026. So it is also really important for you all to get connected to your projects. Start getting connected to those now, and encourage even the property owners to connect and set up an account, because we will be able to communicate with folks through that, sending emails and letting folks know that LURUs are due. But that will be the Brownfields property management will not be the long-term electronic submittal format for LURUs. It will be Dynamics. So that's the other change that's coming. The issue resolution that we're working on essentially says that we understand that the U.S. Postal Service we may continue to accept hard copy mails, but we are saying for all old agreements where this was the only official mechanism for submittals to DEQ, we are now saying submittal through this portal is an official mechanism for all the old agreements. So if there's concern, we've heard occasional concern about, but my agreement says I have to send it by hard copy. But so that hopefully this issue resolution will close that. So that is those are the two issue resolutions that are pending, and they should be out sometime in April. Like I said, you're going to start hearing, hopefully we'll probably mention this in our next stakeholder calls as well, just as reminders, so that everybody is aware of these changes as they come, especially as we get closer to LURU season for next January. So the question in the chat, if someone misses 2 years, will you get a $2,000 fee? That's my general mindset. It's if you miss multiple years, hopefully we'll get to a place where people only miss 1 year and then it's fine. So the fees will be instated as of 2026. So I'm not going to retroactive for the time frame when that did not exist, when those fees were not in place. But going forward, yes, I would say if it is an annual fee to resolve that. So that's really all I had, unless there's any other questions. Awesome. Thank you. Back to you, Bruce. You're muted if you're talking.
Thank you, Jocelyn. All right. Let me go on to a issue resolution that we have recently put in place, and I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it. And I'm going to let Sharon talk about this, I do believe.
Yep, great. Thanks, Bruce. Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to discuss issue resolution 17 with you a bit this afternoon. It addresses the identification of emerging compounds at brownfield properties. We recently issued this resolution. You can find it on our website under statutes and guidance. And it addresses these questions that have arisen as to actions required on brownfield properties where PFAS have been identified either prior to applying to the program, while the property is being actively assessed, or after an agreement has been recorded. So this issue resolution basically provides a pathway for each of these scenarios. So we'll take the easy one first. So prior to application of the Brownfields redevelopment section and during Brownfields assessments, if you suspect that PFAS is a historic contaminant, just include that in your phase 1 and phase 2 ESA processes. There's a high number of industrial processes and locations. We've stated some in this issue resolution. The real question is what doesn't go in as a possible industrial process that has PFAS, but we have listed some primary ones in the issue resolution. And the thing about PFAS, of course, as many of you already know, there needs to be additional level of care during sample collection and handling to protect the integrity of the samples. So you must use appropriate field sampling and analytical methods. The EPA, ITRC, and DEQ are good sources of information for these approaches if you're not familiar with them. We do have, and of course, you're gonna include those results in a report to us, like you would any other result, with signed and sealed by a North Carolina PE or PG. And we now have IMAX for groundwater for 7 PFAS, ranging from 0.001 nanograms per liter to 7,000 nanograms per liter. There's also 37 PFAS that have PSRGs in the January 2025 risk calculator and screening level lists. And the risk calculator basically has those 37 for all of the environmental media, each page in the risk calculator. So soil, groundwater, soil, surface water, soil, gas, and indoor air. The good news is only 10 of those 37 right now are considered to be volatile. So there is also, in addition to a concern about whether someone's drinking PFAS, there is a potential VI concern with some of these compounds. And so, we're going to deal with PFAS that you find under this kind of situation like we would any other historic contaminant. Bruce, could you advance to the next slide? So the other circumstance where I think people are most probably concerned about is what happens if you find PFAS after a recordation of a Brownfields agreement. Of course, we recognize that prior to the knowledge of PFAS, the assessment would not have been done. PFAS is not going to be on the Exhibit 2, and so there are legitimate concerns that PFAS is not explicitly included in the scope of the environmental liability protection per se. But we want to make sure you understand that Brownfields has no plans to ask for a general reassessment of older sites for PFAS. I think exceptions to this could be if you know that there could be a drinking water risk, perhaps, right? But generally, it seemed that most brownfield agreements have groundwater use prohibitions, right? So that would be protective, right, in many circumstances. But if for some reason PFAS is found after a BFA is recorded, the property at that time should basically do the following: provide written documentation of such a finding in an assessment report with, the sampling and analytical protocols signed and sealed by a North Carolina PG or PE, and then have a technically sound rationale that compares the historical sources of PFAS and how that is separate and distinguishable from any potential PFAS-related chemicals that were used, stored, or handled at the site since the Brownfield agreement was recorded. And there may be none, right? But what you're trying to do there is give a rationale to us why you believe this PFAS that was found is of a historic nature. And for sites where the reuse is clearly demonstrated to us that the PD or a follow-on owner has not caused or contributed PFAS, we'll take those findings into consideration regarding liability or lack thereof. But we generally, next slide, Bruce. Generally, we don't feel it's necessary to amend the agreement in such situations. And again, here we're reiterating, we have no plans to ask for a general reassessment of properties that have recorded agreements for PFAS. And that was really all I had. Are there any questions on PFAS related matters?
We have one about VI assessment. Is there a test method for VI assessment of PFAS?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, Joe. All I can say is that we now have vessels for them, and might want to look at ITRC documents to see if they have, or EPA documents to see if they have identified. So you've looked and come up empty. Okay.
Yeah, let me just say that I am aware that EPA is looking into this issue. I don't know ultimately where that's research is going to end, but there have been found to be potential volatility issues for some PFAS compounds, not all.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that they are generally looking at this issue. There's no methods or other thoughts as of yet as to how to sample for them. That is going to be a long research project for EPA to conduct, right? So that is an issue that EPA is aware of and has looked at in the very early stages and rudiments of it. There's nothing at this particular point in time about methods for indoor air or anything like that for PFAS. I think they're just looking at it as, hey, is PFAS an issue for potential VI? And the answer to that question is mostly not, but there are a few PFAS compounds that could be. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's the
we've
sort
got
of the generalized state of that
yeah.
Science at the moment.
So the vessels have come before the analytical methods, it seems like. But I think, what it might suggest is, if you're on the fence about whether VI is necessary, if you think there's PFAS, you might want to put in a system, right? Qualitatively, that might be how you would view that.
The next question in the chat is there, sorry, Carol, I'm gonna summarize. Is there a way to pay a fee to get consideration of the issue to officially include it in the agreement via amendment or otherwise?
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to be looking at that on a case-by-case basis as to the absolute need for that before we go down that road. We generally don't think that's going to be necessary.
Yeah.
What about, say, some sort of response to their submittal?
Yeah, or a comfort letter of some kind.
A comfort letter of some sort is definitely realistic.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I think we have
one.
This issue on one situation where we have
yes.
just recently issued a comfort letter.
Yeah. And in that case, it was very clear that the PD did not cause or contribute. Anything else on PFAS or issue resolution 17? Again, you can find that on the website. It's under statutes and guidance.
I'll pop the link in the chat too.
Oh, thanks.
All right.
Okay. And I think,
Bruce, if you want to change the slide, I think Tracy's up next.
Tracy's up. Yep, Tracy's up next.
Yep, I am. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Well, I think you are all familiar, or the majority is familiar with the minimum requirements checklist for site assessment work plans and reports. As we've been working through different process reviews and working with the smaller subset of stakeholders, one of our process improvements to increase efficiency for projects is what we're coming up with is a minimum site assessment and reporting requirements checklist. It is essentially the existing checklist with some more prescribed activities. We are currently developing that. It's really almost ready to be released, but just not quite yet. But what that means for you all is no more work plans. And in my head, we are all in person and you all are cheering. However, some of you may have some apprehension regarding no more work plans. So we're also going to still include like a kickoff or scoping meeting that will include either the project initiator or the assigned project manager. And you will go through essentially a data gap evaluation and develop a scope of work for that specific project. And that will result in the submission of tables that outline all of the different sampling that you're intending on conducting: soil, groundwater, soil gas, subslabs, sediment, surface water, any of those things that could be included. And then figures that outline where those samples are going to be located. And the methodologies for, field analytical or field sampling procedures and analytical methods are already included in the checklist or referenced in the checklist. Those should be, followed when you're doing this work. And then the report would be submitted in accordance with the checklist. We will use this checklist like we have in the past with the existing checklist and verify that all of the items have been included. If there are going to be deviations from that scope, you definitely still need to get prior DEQ approval, just like you do now. And if the report is incomplete, in other words, you haven't followed the scope that was agreed to, that some aspects of the checklist are missing, the report will be returned, and it will, the project will be placed in lower in the queue until we can work it back into the capacity of that project manager. This was the subset of stakeholders were very excited about this proposal, so we have moved forward with it, and we do expect to release this shortly. We need to review it with our own internal, the full staff first, but we expect that we'll be able to release this in April, and this will bring, a greater efficiency to all the projects. It's going to save time for everyone across the board. And saving time, I know for PD teams means saving money. So we hope this is successful, and that it will take probably a few months to work out all the bumps, but I think we can make this a successful approach to getting our reports done. And that's all I had for that. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
A question in the chat is, will this include work plans on recorded agreements or just new sites? How long do you think these will be turned around? Any current work plans that you're currently working on, keep going forward with what you're doing right now. We're not going to start doing this, like Tracy said, until the guidelines are released officially. So we're going to, until they are released, please continue to do the work plans the way the current process is. In PMB, I have no objections to using this, but know that the methodologies that have to be followed are, all the methodologies for sampling are pretty well documented in a variety of documents, but we will be reviewing the reports heavily, and we would expect the same scoping meeting, table and figures, and so we would expect that in PMB as well. So I have no objection to using this in PMB, but just so.
And as far as turnaround time, until we actually work through some of these, not sure. We do still have a bit of a backlog of new sites coming in and going through project initiation and getting off the ground. But as we work through these and continue to, create more improvements along our process, hopefully the timeline will reduce. And right now, I'm not sure what that looks like, but hopefully it will be less than what you've experienced in the past.
Any other questions before I move on?
We are right at 2:00. We understand that. It obviously, if you have to go, it's being recorded. So we're going to continue on, but it is being recorded.
Okay, and we have another checklist to mention here too.
I do not need much time, everyone. So if you want to stay on, this will be very quick. So in the spirit of streamlining our processes and easing in your preparation and our review, we have generated an operations and maintenance checklist for VIM systems that are operating. As you're aware, our standard VI land use restriction update requires that the system be demonstrated to be effective and operating as designed. We typically look to an operations and maintenance checklist to do that. So this has been just standardized. We're not standardizing the layout, but just the information that needs to be included so that our review can be as quick as possible and your field teams can complete the work that we need to make sure the system is operating as designed. And then we also in this document have an appendix that is going to include guidance for your active depressurization systems. So a lot of our systems that are active have been operating for quite some time, and we have either monthly or quarterly monitoring of those of the pressures in those systems, and we're starting to see some requests for reduction of pressure monitoring frequency to semi-annually or less. And so we have guidance in this new document that should be released by the end of March. That is, what the requirements are for reducing your pressure monitoring frequency while maintaining the system in good working order. So this link, when Bruce sends out the slides, this link is active to our Brownfield statutes and guidance page, and that's where the O&M checklist as well as the assessment checklist is going to be uploaded once they are finalized. So just be on the lookout for this as well when it comes to operations and maintenance guidelines.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jordan. Any questions on this particular aspect? Any questions overall on any portions of this? All right, well, if not, I appreciate you all attending. Hang on, we just got another question in, I think.
I'll take this one, Bruce.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, Amy, the no further interest letter basically kind of deactivates now that application. There are a number of reasons why no further interest letter may be sent out. Lack of response, failure to follow our procedural requirements, and also withdrawal by the prospective developer itself. And the oversight. So what happens when we issue a no further interest letter is that letter is also CC'd to Janet McDonald with IHSB. And it's just our notice to them that it is no longer under the, in actively pursuing a brownfield agreement. No longer in our program.
I trust that answers your question, Amy. Any other particular questions? Effectively, if you want to call it a revocation of eligibility, that would be accurate, yes. I don't think we've used that term, but I think effectively it's essentially that's what that means.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Any other questions for any issues that you've seen today? Or questions other than that? Okay, well, with no further questions, I really appreciate everybody attending. Thank you all very much. We will do this again in early summer.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.